Are you an edgy 13-year-old? If so, this book is for you. Welcome to Literary Disasters, where I read awful books so you don't have to. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and recommend awful books that you have read so that I can spare others your misery. The book I will be judging today is The Long Hard Road Out of Hell by Marilyn Manson and Neil Strauss. This is supposed to be Manson's autobiography, but I feel like a lot of it is intentionally exaggerated or outright fabricated in order to make him look cool. The book begins with a quote from some guy named Nietzsche. The quote gives some insight into the state of Manson's ego, but the book has been out for 23 years now and nobody has caught that typo. For ease of review, I have grouped different portions of the book into several categories rather than going chronologically. The first category is animal cruelty. I have no problem with people hunting for food, but I do have a problem with people hunting just for the sake of killing things. Manson falls into the latter category. He also details how he liked shooting at random children with a BB gun for fun. Later, he explains how he idolized the kid next door who, in addition to abusing animals, would sexually assault them as well, and allegedly murdered Manson's dog. The second category is insanity, and I don't mean in the, hey, I'm quirky so I'm insane sort of way. I mean in the sending rape threats because you want to have sex with someone kind of way. The I wanted to murder my bandmate but opted not to because I didn't want to have to talk to the police while I was high kind of way. The I was worried about my friend not because he might die, but because if he did die, I would have to talk to the police while I was high kind of way. The I spent 5 pages detailing how I was going to murder a former band performer who I had been cheating on my girlfriend with kind of way. The I saw an accident where people probably died and didn't even bother calling for help because would they have done the same for me? I don't know, so I'm going to assume the negative kind of way. The shoplifters should be punished by death while I sit here shoplifting kind of way. The third category shouldn't surprise anybody. It's drugs. While Manson repeatedly states how much he despises drug addicts, for example in the previous section where he wanted to kill his bandmate while high for being a drug addict, he also goes on to detail how big of a drug addict he is. From detailing his first overdose to detailing how big of a negative impact drugs were having on his life, all while claiming that he isn't a drug addict and that he was always in control. He also has a tendency to over-exaggerate the effects of drugs. The fourth category also shouldn't come as any surprise: domestic violence. Manson goes into more detail than necessary about sending his mother to the hospital because he suspected that she was cheating on his father. He also claims to have hit her, spit on her, and tried to choke her. He concludes this section by stating that she never retaliated, she just cried, and I never felt sorry for her. So how did Marilyn Manson, the character, come to be? It starts in his mother's basement. No, seriously. I've covered some of the major things that contributed to his transformation, such as the animal and human abuse and domestic violence. I will be covering some other related topics later, and I'll be skipping all of the normal teenage stuff, but his transformation really begins in the late 80s, where a 20-ish-year-old Brian Warner decided that he hated his parents and the world because they were forcing him, an adult, to move from Ohio to Florida because his father got a new job. In Florida, he falls in love with a woman who breaks his heart, and he decides that rather than moving on and healing like a normal person would, that he will instead close himself off emotionally from everyone so that he will never be the victim again. Manson describes the formation of Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids as a science project to see if a white band that wasn't rap could get away with acts far more offensive and illicit than Two Live Crew's dirty rhymes. As a performer, I wanted to be the loudest, most persistent alarm clock I could be. I think he succeeded there. We'll end this section with a quote about guilt and morality. By now, I had begun to feel removed from the everyday world of morality. Guilt had become more a fear of getting caught than any sense of right or wrong. Category 6 is one that has gotten Manson an awful lot of media attention recently, much more than any music he has put out in the last 20 years. His treatment of women. From dumping his first girlfriend because she got snot on his hand, to accusing a woman who dumped him of being the town slut and that having a boyfriend would ruin her reputation, even elementary and high school Brian Warner wasn't a class act. When Manson finally moves out of his parents' house at age 22, he moves in with his girlfriend. He writes, "It wasn't about sex, it was about support. She paid for everything, gave me advice, treated me like a child, and tolerated my mental abuse. She was sweet, plain, and nurturing, which was what I was looking for." As Manson gets older, his depravity increases. What we did was we pulled a trick that I've become quite famous for. It is pouring a large glass of tequila for your adversary, or your victim, and then pouring a large glass of beer for yourself and pretending that yours is tequila also. You convince them to drink down their large glass until they vomit and pass out and are left to be tormented. A similar trick had been done to me when I was young. Giving someone alcohol poisoning specifically so that you can do whatever you want to them is not really something to brag about. Did Manson ever feel bad about taking advantage of women? In an interview for this book, he states, "I should mention that I do not feel that she was being exploited by any means because, despite however many cameras, street musicians, and sketch artists were in the room clapping and dancing around to Slayer or whatever was playing at the time, she was very excited to be a part of it. This was a girl that was brought into the studio specifically because she was deaf, and one of the band members had been talking about having a fetish for deaf girls. Just because she wasn't raped doesn't mean that it wasn't exploitative." After the band member completed his sexual fantasy, Manson and another band member proceeded to urinate on her. While he may not have felt bad about the things he did question some of them at one point, writing, "Why am I doing this, I thought to myself. I wasn't trying to turn her or myself on. I was just trying to be dirty. The situation seemed to call for it. I could have just as easily stuck my hand in a garbage can and accomplished the same thing." So why didn't you just stick your hand in a garbage can then? Category 7 is hypocrisy. The first example also includes exploiting women, where spitting in a naked woman's anus was too crude for Manson to participate in, although he found it entertaining, but giving women enemas in what he called the bowel movement contest was not. While he does admit to his hypocrisy, he believes that admitting to it excuses it. We're all hypocrites, but by admitting it, you transcend it and it no longer becomes a personality defect as it is in the people who blindly cling to their own self-righteousness. That's not how that works. You're still a hypocrite. It's still a personality defect. Category 8 is delusions of grandeur, and this again includes examples of hypocrisy and exploitation of women. Sitting on a steel tower in Mississippi doing drugs to warm up for a show, because he's not an addict, Manson and a few others swore to stop exploiting and humiliating girls backstage. Instead, we decided to perform a therapeutic service for them. This therapeutic service would involve exploiting and humiliating girls backstage, but on video camera. My entire message and everything I'd begun striving to be as a person ran in direct opposition to Brad. I wanted to be strong and independent, to think for myself and help other people think for themselves. I couldn't, and still can't, tolerate someone who's a fucking weakling living out of a spoon and a needle. But being a fucking weakling who lives out of a pile of nose candy and a rolled up dollar bill is perfectly fine. If you want to know how Manson really views himself, he sums it up nicely when he writes, "I don't believe in chance, accidents, or coincidences. I believe in the delusional self, which is to say that I believe that the things I talk and think about change the world around me and result in events that appear to be coincidental. I believe that my life is so important that it affects the lives of everyone else. I believe I am God." Yeah, sure, buddy. Category 9 is Satanism. Manson goes into great detail about his forays into Satanism in his meetings with Anton LaVey. Manson and LaVey got along well, according to Manson, due to their intellectual elitism, since the greatest sin is stupidity. While both of them may have a high degree of intelligence, they were also self-absorbed pricks more interested in creating an edgy character than anything else. Seriously, look it up. Both are notorious liars dancing around the deception accusations by claiming that it's just a character. Manson is as much of a Satanist as LaVey was an organist in a Christian church. Manson writes that LaVey made Manson a reverend in the Church of Satan, which the Church of Satan disagrees with, stating in a tweet that it was only an honorary title, and which Manson later claimed in an interview with Bill O'Reilly was something that people made a lot out of. I think people made a lot out of it because Manson made a lot out of it. Nobody would have known it happened had he not gone around telling everybody about it. The 10th category is performance art. And yes, it is in quotation marks for a reason. Manson writes, "The first time we performed together, I sang while holding her on a leash the whole time. To make a point about our patriarchal society, of course, not because it turned me on to drag a scantily clad woman around the stage by a leather leash. I'll let you decide what you believe here, considering he goes on to explain how he gave her progressively cruder beatings each show. Take that, patriarchy." On the following page, he explains how there was always a message behind the violence, like when he would toss into the audience dozens of Ziploc bags, half of them filled with chocolate chip cookies, the other half with cat turds. What was that supposed to teach his fans? Never trust Marilyn Manson? He also details terrorizing children at a theme park, which he found exhilarating, and writes, "There's nothing like the feeling of knowing that you've made a difference in someone's life, even if that difference is a lifetime of nightmares and a fortune in therapy bills." You're a fool if you believe anything that comes out of Manson's mouth. I believe that most of these stories were probably based in reality, but were greatly exaggerated in order to make him seem more exciting. If you want an entertaining story about a band and all of the crazy things they get into, read NoFX's The Hepatitis Bathtub and Other Stories. It's not as boring and has less edgy 13-year-old bullshit.